Well, it's a couple minutes after. I think we might go ahead with some introductions. So, Happy New Year to everybody. This is our first webinar for 2016, and just FYI to remind everybody, we will not have a webinar in February because the fourth annual Becoming Baby Friendly in Oklahoma Summit is scheduled for February 12th, and Ingrid and I will be crazy until that's over. And also
Lisa Early.
Our second
has joined the conference.
Our second Reducing Racial and Ethnic Inequities in Breastfeeding conference is the day before, Thursday, February 11th. So hopefully everyone saw the email with online registration for both of those days. So we hope to see everyone at either or both of those. And anyway, without further ado, we will introduce our speakers today. And I will just briefly, I want to definitely thank Kathy Parks and Kirsten Crane, who are our presenters today, and we are excited to have them on board with us. They've actually done this presentation for one of Ann Meerwood's projects, the CHAMPS project, which is also a baby-friendly an effort to help hospitals in a number of states, but particularly focused on some of the southern states that have some of the lowest breastfeeding rates. Anyway, I will, let's see, who wants to start? Kathy, are you starting with introductions, or Kirsten?
Yeah, I can. This is Kirsten, and I can kind of take it away. Thank you guys so much for inviting us today, and we are excited to be here with your Oklahoma group. And it's kind of fun. Kathy and I didn't know each other before we put this presentation together, so we've had a great time working on it and preparing it for you today. So I will start with just letting Kathy introduce herself, and we will go from there.
Good morning, good afternoon. I am in San Antonio, Texas, and
Nancy Bacon has joined the conference.
A registered nurse, international board certified lactation consultant since 1992. I currently have a private practice called Breastfeeding Perspectives, and I also work as the only lactation consultant for Christus Santa Rosa Health System in New Braunfels, which is just outside of San Antonio. We recently went through our baby-friendly site assessment, and we are awaiting final word on that right now.
Ooh, yay! Luck.
Yeah. And so we, when Kristen and I decided how to do this, we wanted to be a little different. So,
Kathy Harris.
Our ages, I'm a baby boomer, and I listen to every kind of music under the sun, and I'm kind of getting used to country music since I live in Texas. And my leadership style is to empower others. So, Kirsten, you want to introduce yourself?
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm one of the project managers for the CHAMPS program, which Becky mentioned in the introduction. CHAMPS stands for Communities and Hospitals Advancing Maternity Practices, and it is also an initiative to help assist hospitals in achieving baby-friendly status. We are out of Boston University, and we are funded through the Kellogg Foundation. Before I worked for CHAMPS, I was the public health nutritionist for the Blackfeet Community Hospital, which is an Indian Health Service hospital in Browning, Montana. And I still live on the reservation in Montana. When we became baby-friendly in November of 2014, we were the second baby-friendly hospital in Montana, so it was a huge achievement. We're a tiny hospital. We had 180 to 200 births a year, and just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about leadership, my experience was in a very informal leadership position. As the public health nutritionist, I wasn't in charge of anyone, and so I hope that my experience might also help kind of resonate. I know there are a lot of people like CLCs and lactation counselors and consultants within hospital settings that are being put in charge of these baby-friendly initiatives, and it's a tough place to be. It feels tough when you don't have director or manager or some title like that behind your name. But as Kathy and I will talk about today, there are so many different ways to embrace leadership, and it can be done from any position across the health system. So with that, we will move into our objectives. So today, Kathy and I, when we were putting this together, we really kept coming back to the idea that it's all about collaboration. So we're going to talk a lot about collaborative leadership. And then Kathy is going to take us back to all those college theory classes about stages of change theory and how that applies to the Baby-Friendly Hospital Initiative. And then finally, we will wrap up with some more practical leadership ideas and approaches related to achieving that baby-friendly status. So we'll jump right in with the idea that leadership is now really, we're looking, it's a kind of a new paradigm shift in leadership that I think that we'll see more and more across the nation, and why not just start applying it to baby-friendly right now? So this is the idea that really, especially baby-friendly, is not a top-down initiative. It's not something that any person can do alone. That all of these different leadership styles that we've all heard about before, things like authoritarian leadership style or democratic leadership style, those are interesting and important to consider, especially as ourselves as individuals, kind of what are our strengths, how do we tend to insert ourselves into leadership positions, but it's also really important to look a step further to collective leadership questions. So, for example, instead of asking who are our leaders at the hospital, the better question might be, what does it look like when the entire department harnesses the leadership and development of every employee in moving toward our goal? So how do we, as a department, make sure that everyone is a leader in some aspect of change? So that leader position or that lead, that baby-friendly lead, is more of a way of tying everybody together and recognizing strengths and leadership potentials and bringing those out and bringing them to the group, rather than being the one person who is trying to do everything or tell everyone how things are supposed to be done. Let's see. And so then I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and she's going to talk a little bit more about classic characteristics of leaders and players in the Baby-Friendly Hospital Initiative that are really important for facilitating a very collaborative style.
Thanks, Kirsten. Those of you that are in the baby-friendly pathway know that it can be a challenge to pull in the people that you need to work together and be collaborative. So leadership comes from a lot of different places, a lot of different people, but some of the things you might think about in pulling that team together are mentors. We talked to Linda Smith, a longtime lactation consultant, when we first started looking at baby-friendly, and she told us, have a gray-haired gentleman on your committee. And so we did, and his influence made a huge difference for us. He was our mentor and our wise person. You also want to consider things like vision and motivation. How are you going to keep everybody excited? Those of us who've led the baby-friendly charge in our own hospital, I have found that it's difficult to keep the same motivation in everyone else that I have had for the last 4 years. So pulling in fun things, and you'll see some things that we've done a little bit later in the slide presentation, but I use humor. So we have things like the Golden Nipple Award, and so we'll present a bag of or a dish of gold-wrapped kisses, chocolate kisses, and those can be presented to just about anybody on the committee. Think about different ways to approach different things. For example, ethics. When we first started on the baby-friendly pathway, everyone was concerned,
has joined the conference.
Y'all have heard about paying for artificial infant milk. We pulled in the ethics committee to say, hey, this is the only food item that we pay for, or that we receive free. Everything else we pay for. And how ethical is that? And that made a difference in changing the mindset to the point where 4 years later, our CEO and CNO said, we will not receive anything free in the hospital. That's a huge issue. Next slide.
Hey, Kathy, it's Becky here.
Yes.
We're getting some kind of beeping or something when you're talking. So I don't know.
I know there were a couple of people that signed in. Could that be it?
No, like right now, just you talking, there's beeping.
Okay. Let me turn off my speakerphone and just go straight to my phone itself. So hold on.
You could also have everyone who's calling in on the phone, if you'll mute yourself, that way we're not getting any feedback from you guys.
Yeah, I'm not hearing, that.
Yeah, I don't either.
And then we can
Georgiana Gibby Sweetwater from Claremore Indian Hospital.
Okay, did you get beeping
has
with
joined
that
the
call
conference.
in? Did you get beeping with that call in?
Well,
Yes, I did.
Hi, Gibby.
Hi. Is that Becky?
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Hi, Becky. How are you?
So,
All right.
So that's probably it, Becky. It's because I've had 3 or 4 people call in while I was just talking. So to go on, you're going to have all of these different people, or you should have, on your baby-friendly team, everything from the lactation staff and the physicians to purchasing to IT. You need to talk about how you're recording what you're doing in those electronic medical records, because those will be looked at. Medical billing, other outside agencies, for example, WIC, Waleche League, doulas, midwives, other lactation people outside of your hospital group. All of those areas need to help with this project. It cannot be just the lactation consultant who does this, or you're going to lose that particular person at the end of the 4 years. So every instrument in the orchestra is important.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, so this is Kirsten again, and as Kathy was just talking about all of the important people on a team, I am showing here kind of a pictorial schematic of how my team worked at the hospital where I was at in Browning, Montana, and really from a communication point of view, like how the communication was structured, which, as you all know, communication is vital to these kind of collaborative projects like Baby Friendly. I put the lead position right in the middle since I was really the hub of information between our community partners, the different nursing departments, medical staff, prenatal clinic, administration, and in our hospital, everyone who had any involvement in the process was invited to every meeting. And we had meetings every other week just to make sure we never lost momentum between meetings. If we knew coming up to a meeting that we were going to discuss something that we really needed to involve a certain department or person, then we would very deliberately make sure to reach out and invite that person with a phone call or a stop by their office. We always took notes on all of the meetings. This is just communication that is so important. And I think it gets overlooked in a lot of places. So I definitely encourage people to write notes on every meeting, send them out to everyone. In our hospital, everyone from the person who was in charge of our electronic medical records got our notes, our WIC staff got our notes, our Indian Health Service headquarters in Rockville, Maryland got our notes. Everyone got our notes. Another thing here to think about, especially when you're in maybe a less formal leadership position, is that entire team that was on Kathy's slide there, and many that are listed here on my slide. That's what brings the leadership kind of power, if you will, to the initiative. So if you a lot of times, well, and even if you are in a formal leadership position, it doesn't often do a lot of good to say, you will do this way by this date. There's no, there will be no conversation.
Jeannie Campbell has left the conference.
And so the team is really, really important, especially in an informal leadership position, so that you have a way, so that your team can say, hey, this is how we're going to plan to do this. This is the deadline that this needs to get done by. So it's not you as the lead saying, going to nursing staff and saying, you need to do your training by this day. And they're like, well, my management hasn't said anything about this. I don't, like you're not the person I answer to. So having that team is what really gives it the power and the ability to move things forward. Let's see. So kind of moving forward from that, by the time we were done, we had a really well-functioning baby-friendly team. But it didn't start out that way. And so Kathy is going to talk a little bit about stages of change theory and how this really applies to the entire baby-friendly process. Oh, well, she will in a minute after she talks about...
I'll get there. This is one of my favorite quotes in a nursing leadership book, that leaders recognize that no man, and I'll insert, or woman, is an island, and quickly garner, foster, and build collaborative teams. They make it possible for people to do good work by trusting them and enabling them. And I have felt that way for a long time. It's important in the baby-friendly pathway to remember that no one person can stand alone to implement change that's as vast as this process is. We'll flip to the next slide. Oh. This is not a 6-week class on changes and the stages of change theory. Just want you to kind of get an overview of how this works. You kind of have a pre-contemplation state that moves into a contemplation state, into a preparation, into an action, into maintenance, and then termination, or change, and then back into that change again. The easiest way to explain it is the next slide. No, not me. Well, maybe we'll think about it. Okay, so what do I do now? Okay, let's do this. It is possible. And that can take a couple of weeks. It can take a couple of years. In our case, it took 8 years to get there. So I think it's important to remember that in between each one of these stages, you're going to hit some valleys of despair. This is when you feel like it's never going to happen. I am up against that brick wall again, and I'm ready to turn in my resignation. I have been in that valley of despair many times over the last 8 years, and especially the 4-year formal portion of Baby Friendly. The last time was the week immediately prior to the site visit. Know that there are temporary valleys, and you pull on your team, and you work collaboratively together to get to where you want to be. Kirsten?
Great. Okay, so to help keep you from some of those valleys of despair, Kathy and I came up with a little collection of ideas that we felt really got us through things. And so the idea here is practical tactics. A lot of these ideas are not new. We don't need to reinvent new things. So this picture is my daughter trying to eat spinach with a spatula, and we all know spinach is great for us and we should be eating it, but we have invented a fork, and she will figure that out eventually, and use the proper tools for the proper for its need. And so we will start with one of the most basic and helpful things, our binders. And I'll let Kathy talk about that since these are her binders.
These are my binders, but they were based on a list that Kirsten put together. This was the most helpful thing I could have possibly done. And of course, being a little on the OCD side, the colors matched. I picked a photograph that I could use as a theme throughout the entire thing. One notebook contained all of the education documentation, a copy of the curriculum that we used, certificates of completion for nurses, for physicians who we could get to do it, for dietitians. It also contained information about code compliance. The second notebook had things in it like all of our policies, whether it was the infant feeding policy or any possibly related policies that could be viewed by the assessors. We also included all kinds of prenatal information. We don't have a prenatal clinic, but we do provide prenatal classes. The curricula for the classes was provided. The advertising booklets were provided. Everything that could possibly have been asked for was in these notebooks.
Awesome. And so at our hospital, we used binders like these for the assessors, but we also had another binder that was like for our working group. And we kept all sorts of things in that binder as well. So we kept meeting notes in there. We kept all of the documents from the different phases of Baby Friendly so that we could always go back and look at that. For instance, like in the development phase of Baby Friendly, they asked for you to create plans of implementation for staff training, collecting data, patient education plans. And when we had those right there where we could go back to them at every meeting, that really helped us say, oh, but this is what we decided on there, and we could kind of update it and put the new versions in that binder so that we had just one place where when we showed up at the meeting, we had all of our collective work stored together. That was also really important because a lot of times the leads of these projects changes. So, or just not even just leads, but anybody in there. And so keeping everybody's work kind of in one place really helps so that if somebody needs to lead the team for some reason, then the rest of the team has access to that work that they've done. One of the things that we found really important was re-engineering the environment for success. So creating an environment that makes the correct response the default response so that the initiatives can become really sustainable. You have fewer mistakes, fewer relapses. This is kind of a common theme in the public health sector, but it applies really well to Baby Friendly as well. So this picture, we have a 15-month-old daughter, and she loves our phones. And she takes them, like if she can find them, she will take them anywhere with her. And one day I walked into the bathroom, and she was we luckily had started putting the toilet seat down, and she was playing with this phone on top of the toilet seat, and I realized, oh my gosh, like we need to make sure that we engineer the environment with the toilet seat down every single time to ensure that we do not have a mistake like an iPhone falling into the toilet. And so along that similar vein as it applies to baby friendly, things such as coming up with really strong, solid electronic medical record note templates. These are really important for prompting clinicians so that they can make good decisions. For example, a lot of the postpartum education pieces are, you're not technically required to have those all documented in an electronic medical record, but when they are in the electronic medical record and a nurse can click, yes, I taught this mother how to hand express, that helps prompt her and remind her or him, hey, I need to teach, I need to make sure that I teach this, and yes, I did it. Click, check, done. So setting up really strong electronic medical record note templates is one way to reinvent that environment. At our hospital, we put all of our formula in the Pyxis system so that nurses had to have a doctor order in order to take formula out of the system, and it was tracked and linked to every single baby. So we no longer had any formula that just got given to moms because of the convenience for nursing staff. Kathy, you had a couple ideas for re-engineering the environment for success.
Yeah, we came up with quite a few different re-engineering items. The pacifiers were removed from normal newborn and postpartum Pyxis and put only in the NICU. And so they were only to be used in there if a baby got one but then went out to the regular room, that it was thrown away. It was tossed out the door. We changed our nursery. We needed space. We're in a landlocked area and don't have space to build more room. And we needed a neonatal observation unit. We needed a level 2 NICU. So we took our nursery and changed it. We no longer have a normal newborn nursery and haven't had for about 3 years. That helped with the golden hour, which we advertised both through flyers, newspapers, radio, and a golden hour sign on every labor and delivery room door. We put breastfeeding posters in every room, whether they were labor and delivery or postpartum. They were there and available in both English and in Spanish. The informed feeding consent was developed by the Baby Friendly Committee. It informs the parent about the negative consequences of the use of artificial infant milk, and they can sign whether they want to exclusively breastfeed, partially breastfeed and partially artificially feed, or completely exclusively artificially feed. That then becomes a part of the physical medical record. And then lastly, we re-engineered our break room so that there was a learning notebook in there that's updated weekly with new articles, new information about topics that relate to nursing care, breastfeeding, baby-friendly type topics. We did a lot of re-engineering, and it has paid off.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. All right. One of those nitty-gritty things, Puff Daddy said, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. And a lot of quality improvement used to be about throwing money at a problem, how much resources do we have to solve this problem. But quality experts, such as Dr. Neil Baker, who works for the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, he, I think, would disagree and say that it's all about the relationships. Relationships are a huge piece of quality improvement, and Baby Friendly is a quality designation. So keeping this in mind, I went to a relationship expert, Brené Brown, who many of you have probably heard of. She's actually from Texas. She researches vulnerability and shame. She's very popular, has some big books out. So thinking about relationships and how they work in quality improvement and getting big projects like Baby Friendly to be successful, it is really important to make sure that every person on the team realizes that their decisions affect the entire team and their immediate colleagues, and that while it's important to have good relationships to work through things, you don't have to be best friends with people, but you do need to be consistent. You do need to have clear boundaries. And as I really loved this quote from Brené Brown. She says, what boundaries do I need to put in place so that I can work from a place of integrity and extend the most generous interpretations of the intentions, words, and actions of others? She's really saying, you don't need to put up with things when people are being unreasonable or irresponsible with you. You have a right to put up boundaries so that you can function from a place of integrity. And her definition of integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply profess them. The idea is there's going to be a lot of disagreement. That disagreement can create change, and it can create the ability to move forward. People still need to be held accountable when they do not uphold the pieces of the puzzle that they have said that they would uphold, or they are needing to uphold just to make the initiative successful, such as training. If a nurse says, okay, I will finish the training by March 1st, and it is not done by March 1st, then it is, we still need to follow within the channels of normal management to, discipline. I don't like that word, and I'm not coming up with a better one at the moment, to make sure that person is held accountable for the things that they need to do to make the entire team and initiative successful, but at the same time, making sure that was clearly outlined, that expectations are outlined, so that relationships can function successfully, and if they become damaged, that they can become repaired so that everybody succeeds in this. So like Kathy mentioned earlier, your team is like an orchestra. You can't leave out sections of it. That we need to foster the leadership and talents of everyone when we're considering moving forward on this. I really love, I have an example here. My friend Margaret Ann Yellow Kidney, who was the prenatal nurse at the time that we were going through our Baby Friendly Hospital initiative, she was incredibly valuable to this process. She was the prenatal nurse, so she was essentially the person who was implementing all of the prenatal education and helping the other nurses in that clinic do that successfully as well. And she never felt comfortable sharing her ideas in the meetings. She would, behind closed doors with just me, give me fabulous ideas, but she never really felt confident in sharing those. And so we kind of lost a little bit of her perspective, but as as a team, I think we all finally kind of were able to help her create a space where she and everyone could feel comfortable to share their ideas so that everybody has that ownership in the process. And so Kathy's going to talk a little bit about the idea of giving and receiving feedback and sitting on the same side of the table.
Thanks, Kristen. I like this photo from the standpoint there is no head of the table. You don't have someone in a big fancy chair kind of running the show. We're all in it together and all equally responsible. I think it is vital that that accountability, that responsibility be shared. For example, we have a physician, she happens to be an OB, who does not do baby-friendly. And she will tell you in a very loud, very assertive, not friendly voice that she will never do baby-friendly. And she's going to give all of her mothers a pacifier. The staff took on the responsibility of teaching the moms about why we don't recommend pacifiers. And here's the downside of using them early on, and that we don't have any, and they'll have to bring their own. I didn't have to do anything. And everybody's happy, and the moms do what they feel is best for their baby. Kirsten?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Good example of kind of a way of working around team members that maybe don't want to be team players. So this idea of sitting on the same side of the table, I had a lot of moments where people disagreed strongly, and I always came back to this quote of, I need to wait to talk to them about this until I'm ready, that I feel like I can sit on the same side of the table as them, that I feel like their problem is my problem, that we're in this together, and that whatever they just said or did is not a personal attack. It is something that they have a legitimate concern or reason. Well, legitimate could be up for debate at points. That's the part that you have to get over, right? Before you can sit next to them and say, okay, this is our problem. So, for example, night nursing staff just insisting on doing baths outside of the room, instead of becoming furious after knowing that you've been in the baby-friendly process for years and night staff is still kind of doing these things that a long time ago the team had decided we're not going to do this, you need to, I would encourage, what I did was wait until I felt like I wasn't going to them and shaking my finger and saying, what in the world are you thinking? We've been over this a million times. And until I could kind of get myself to the point where I could say, okay, I need to be able to sit down next to them at the lunch table or some other place where we are at the same level and say, hey, what's up with this? Just tell me about it. I need to know where you're at, because this is still an issue for us, and we need to get through it. So working on moving forward on the same side of the table without damaging relationships is really, really important. And if anybody saw the movie Lincoln, there was a really fabulous quote in there. It says, the quote is from Daniel Day-Lewis, who's playing the part of Lincoln. He said, a compass I learned when I was surveying, it'll point you true north from where you're standing, but it's got no advice about the swamps and deserts and chasms that you'll encounter along the way. If in your pursuit of your destination you plunge ahead, heedless of obstacles, and achieve nothing more than to sink in a swamp, what's the use of knowing true north? And so this really is a good visual for for going forward with Baby Friendly. In the picture there is my husband, who is cross-country skiing up a hill, and you'll notice the switchbacks there. A lot of people, if you've been hiking up a really steep incline, they use switchbacks a lot for that. Because sometimes, even though you know that you want to get to the top of the hill, especially on cross-country skis, if you were to try to just ski straight up that hill, it would be really difficult because you would slide back down. So just knowing that you want to get to the top and that that's true north, and that there is, like, maybe the most direct route would be straight up, it doesn't always work like that. I saw this and I kind of thought of the PDSA cycle that is really popular right now in quality improvement circles. PDSA stands for Plan, Do, Study, Act. So it's taking on little tiny chunks of work at a time and testing them. So if a hospital has never done a skin-to-skin after a vaginal birth, saying let's do skin-to-skin after one vaginal birth, one time, and let's just see how it goes. Let's plan it out how we think it would work perfectly. Let's do it one time with one birth. Let's take notes and just see how it goes. And so that would be like one little switch back up. And once that works, then you try it again and you fix any little flaws, right? And so that's the next little switch back up. So you're doing it in little tiny chunks so that you can expand and scale up without having any major issues. Kathy, I know you've got a couple of examples here.
Yeah, we talked about the pacifiers. We eliminated them from the Pyxis so that they were not available to give out. And we increased the teaching to staff. We provided a handout for staff to share with parents. There were little tiny switchbacks up that mountain, which we did not expect to have. The other one was after the first year of excitement and lots of participation in the committee meetings, people started to fall away. How could we get them revved back up? How could we bring them back to the meetings? And as Kirsten stated, we started sending copies of every single meeting to every single person, and then some. And for the people who had secretaries, the CEO, the CNO, purchasing, we sent notes to their secretaries, and we got on their calendar that way. Those were really nice additions because then people started participating again. Kirsten?
Perfect. All right. And this is back to you, Kathy.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm a huge Kermie fan, so when Kirsten started talking about boiling the frog slowly, that's who I thought of. Now, as a vegetarian, I don't eat frogs, but this saying refers back to the idea of how to literally cook frogs so that you can eat them. You put the frog in cold water or very lukewarm water, and you slowly warm it up so that they don't know they're going to be eaten. If you taught Baby Friendly all 10 steps in someone's face, they're going to panic. Oh, my gosh, look what's happening. We can't do all these changes. But if you implement one little change at a time and you slowly turn up that heat, no one really realizes that they're making the change. And many of those opponents feel like they were the ones that brought on the change, and that's just fine.
Perfect. So then it's always important to reflect back and celebrate your accomplishments, no matter how big or how small. So there we have a couple pictures. One is us getting our designation award at Blackfeet Community Hospital in Browning, and then little things like Kathy's Gold Nipple Awards are also very effective. Kathy, you also have some other things that your hospital did to just really help people get involved and say thank you and good job. Can you give us some of those ideas?
Absolutely. We have a kudos program. So rather than giving somebody a monetary bonus, we can give them kudos points and recognize them in the social media internal system. That was huge. So when a couple of the nurses went to a breastfeeding conference and heard about all these changes for themselves, they wanted to do so much more in the participation phases, and they did. They got lots of kudos. I give kudos when I come on and a mom says, oh my gosh, do you know what this person did for me that kept me breastfeeding? They get kudos. We also have an internal newsletter that goes out electronically, and we would have at least a little paragraph every month on where we stood in Baby Friendly.
Awesome. At our Blackfeet Community Hospital, we also did Employee of the Month, and at our hospital, employees nominate each other. So we had, at least every other month, if not every month for almost a year, our whole team was just nominating each other. And every single Employee of the Month nomination was all about a good job to people who were participating on our Baby Friendly Task Force, which was really cool, just to kind of take that recognition system by storm. Another idea that hospitals have done, which is really successful and cute, a little bit smaller, is to give pins or beads that can signify when nurses have finished certain breastfeeding competency trainings that look really nice. So, for example, taking a safety pin and giving a bead to a nurse who has completed a competency maybe in teaching a mom how to express breast milk, and that's been overseen by a coworker, a colleague, and the colleague said, yes, you're really great at this, good job. And then that nurse can get, maybe a silver bead, and everybody knows that silver bead recognizes competence in helping a mom express breast milk. And so then that was like a very visible sort of kudo along the way so that nurses could get recognized for those skills and competencies as they went along. There are all sorts of just great ideas for celebrating accomplishments.
One of the most important things you can do is have fun. This process is exhausting, and I have said for many years this needs a full-time position just to not run Baby Friendly, but to facilitate the committee to become Baby Friendly hospitals. So keep in mind, what is it that matters to you? How do you enliven your life? You're doing very meaningful work. You're changing the lives of moms and babies. Don't forget that. Preserve and build relationships with your team. Find a way to be creative and foster creativity in your team. And bring joy to your meetings. Now, I happen to work in a Catholic hospital, so all of our meetings anywhere in the hospital start with a reflection of some sort. And we would do that at every Baby Friendly committee meeting. Start with a reflection, and many of the times they were based on moms and babies. Remember to take care of yourself as you're taking care of everyone else.
Great. All right. So that actually is kind of the end of our presentation. But I think Kathy and I were going to just facilitate. We'd like to get some ideas from you guys about things that maybe you have done or seen in your hospital that exemplify really good leadership or brick walls you've hit, things like that. So I'm going to hand it over to Kathy to ask those questions and field some of those responses.
Well, I think, first of all, we want to see who has the most innovative leadership tactics in their team. We're opening up the phone so that everybody can participate.
So repeat that again, Kathy. Who has the most innovative
leadership tactic? What has been the most beneficial and unique tactic you've used? Feel free to share.
Yeah. Anyone on the phone? Yeah, anyone that's on the webinar that has a example they'd like to share? Something they've tried that they think has been effective?
Okay, then how about this? What's your biggest brick wall? What is keeping you from moving forward?
This is Angela at St. Anthony's, and it's not necessarily about what you were just talking about, but we have hit a little bit of a brick wall, but it's not very tall for our prenatal education, and we've got some strategies and are working with our prenatal clinics, and I think we're going to be able to jump over that wall within the next couple weeks. We did hit quite a barrier with that.
That's great. How do you think you are managing to take that wall down a brick at a time?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How are you taking that brick wall down one brick at a time? What are you doing to make it smaller?
We have a couple strategies we're getting ready to implement, and then our presence in the prenatal clinics, we've upped that quite a bit, and I think that's going to make a big difference, making this more real to them, like this is really happening. We've got, I think, a couple ideas of how to institute more education for our patients. We don't get a lot of patients to our prenatal classes, and we're also working on some strategies with that as well.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. Has anyone else run into a brick wall? Why don't some of you share about where you are in the pathway? Are you just starting? Are you getting ready to bring in your site assessment team? Okay, well, must be lunchtime. Y'all are eating. See, that's what it is. But thank you for allowing us to come and share. If you need to reach either one of us, we can provide, I think Becky and Ingrid both have our information for contacting us. You're welcome to holler for us if you need us.
Kathy, this is Becky. I know one barrier that I hear from a number of our hospitals is physician buy-in, or even trying to, identify a physician champion to help them move that forward. So, any thoughts y'all have on physician engagement?
Boy, this is Kathy. I wish I could answer that question. Our physicians are not employees of the hospital. They are contractors. So even though we provided free CMEs and a 4-hour session that's set up in a very physician-friendly platform, it's been very difficult to get our physicians to take that teaching. What has been helpful is just the staff nurses teaching while they're in the middle of a delivery. Hey, we're doing the skin-to-skin immediately, and the OR, and all of those kinds of things. So just getting them in there with the people that they work hand in hand with at that moment.
Okay.
Definitely. And this is Kirsten. I would say that having really clear, consistent communication from the beginning is really important. Making sure that you don't leave the doctors out at the beginning, and even if, sending them an email and saying, hey, we're doing this baby-friendly thing. We'd love it if you showed up to the meetings there at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and that doctor doesn't show up, you can't take that as this doctor's not interested. It's really important to go to their office to make...
Has left the conference.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's fine. To make sure that you're reaching out to them, especially like Kathy was talking about that stages of change theory. Sometimes it can be kind of scary, I think, for doctors to not know exactly what's going to happen, and it's easy to just assume that things are going to be different, and therefore just they don't feel like they want to participate very badly. Change is scary, and so making sure that you sit down with them and have a conversation and make sure you're sitting on the same side of the table as them, listening to what they're worried about and making sure that they can hear why this is so important to you, to your team, to your hospital, to your families. And it might take a few lunch dates with that physician. It might take going to medical staff meetings over and over and over again with a smiling face, with just an upbeat. You need to be very confident in knowing that the Baby Friendly is supporting best practice for maternity care, and that cannot be disputed. But at the same time, really considering the real fears that physicians might have in changing the practice that they've been practicing for a really long time.
All right.
I so agree. This is Kathy. Kirsten, the physician, the OB, who is so, quote unquote, anti-baby friendly, really got that because she wasn't in charge of it. And so once we kind of got behind her facade of anger and aggressiveness, we found out that she really wanted to be in charge of things. And so when we brought her into the situation a little more gently and with purpose, then we have had a much better relationship with her.
So, Kathy, one last question. You mentioned, I think it was you that mentioned that y'all have a consent form for mothers about formula.
Yes.
Would you be willing to share that, send that to me?
Sure, absolutely. I'll be happy to. We are in the process of revising it and removing some stuff from it, and it's only in English right now, but absolutely. I'll be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, we try to make, examples of things available to everybody. So, we are just about out of time, and I know people have, work to get back to, but we thank y'all for presenting for us today and sharing.
Kathy Harris.
A lot of good information. And then just a reminder, if people were, logging in late, to remember that our summit's coming up.
Has left the conference.
Check those online registrations and hope to see you in February. So thanks so much, Kathy and Kristen.
Thank you, Becky.